Hey kids, it's Mrs. Davis from Happy Place to Grow, and you know what special day it is? Yep, that's right, it's St. Patrick's Day. Oh, today if you're wearing the green, you've got the luck of the Irish. Now, in our last video time together, we took a trip to Ireland and we visited the countryside to see what were some things that we could spy in the land of Ireland. We learned a little bit about the people of Ireland, the Irish folk, and we learned that when they came over to America, they brought their special tradition of St. Patrick's Day. And since it's St. Patrick's Day, you know it's one of the traditions for us to read some good old Irish folk tales. Now, a folk tale is a story that's passed on from generation to generation. So I'm going to read you one of my favorite Irish folk tales. It's Jamie O'Rourke and the Big Potato. It's written by Tommy DePaula. He's a great author and illustrator. Now, when Tommy first starts this story off, he introduces us to his love of folk tales because his grandfather had told him lots of stories when he was little, lots of Irish tales because his grandfather was Irish. And so he developed a love in his heart for stories, especially those from Ireland. So he shares with us the story Jamie O'Rourke and the Big Potato. And I love this story because, you know, we did take a trip to Ireland. This story takes place in the land of Ireland. Now remember, this is a make-believe story. It's a folk tale. All right, let's get started. Jamie O'Rourke and the Big Potato. Do you like potatoes? I do. Let's find out what happens in the story Jamie O'Rourke and the Big Potato. There's Jamie. He's the main character. Jamie O'Rourke was the laziest man in all of Ireland. He would do anything to avoid working, especially if it had to do with growing potatoes. You know what lazy means. You just don't want to lift your hand to do a thing. You don't want to exert any energy. And he was the best at being lazy. Jamie O'Rourke, his wife Eileen would say, will have nothing to eat all winter if you don't go out and dig up the praties. That's what potatoes are called in Ireland. Oh, saints preserve us, Jamie would whine. Me back's as sore as can be. Sure as I'm telling you, wife, you'll have to dig them up yourself. I'll break in two if I so much as get out of this bed. Boy, he was lazy. There's Eileen. She's got to go out and dig. So Eileen, who had done all the planting and watering and weeding anyhow, would go out to the tiny garden and dig up the smallest potatoes in Ireland. All because Jamie was too lazy to dig a larger garden and had no money to buy good potato seed. It's just a situation. Uh-oh, something bad's about to happen to poor Eileen. What do you think it is? Oh no, she hurts her back too. Then poor Eileen wrenched her back and was laid up in bed. Saint Bridget and the Virgin Mary herself must have smiled on Eileen O'Rourke, the village women said. Why, it's the first rest she's had since she married Jamie O'Rourke. So they were kind of glad for her because now she gets to lay in bed and rest a little bit. There's Jamie. Looks like he's sneaking out at night. I can see the stars. Where do you think he's going? Let's find out. With Eileen in bed, Jamie began to worry. He got nervous. No Eileen to dig meant no praties all winter, and no praties meant no food. Oh, poor me, wailed Jamie. I'll starve to death. I'd best go to church and confess to Father O'Malley. There's no telling how soon old Death'll be knocking at me door. So, even though it was midnight, Jamie set off to church. He was about halfway down the hill when he heard singing and a tap, tap, tapping sound. Singing and tapping. Who do you think might be doing the singing and the tapping? Wonder who it could be. Oh, Jamie snuck up and peeked through a bush, and look what he spied. You know what that is. Leprechaun. Sure, and I wouldn't be knowin', Jamie whispered, but I swear it's a leprechaun. And sure enough, sitting in a circle of ferns in the moonlight was a leprechaun, singing and hammering tiny nails into the heels of fairy boots he was making. Jamie knew just what to do. Look what he did. Snatched him up by the coattails. He crept up and grabbed the little man by the coattails and held firm. Well, what would you do if you saw a leprechaun? Would you snatch him up too? I don't know. Something to think about. Let me go! Let me go! The leprechaun shouted. Not on your life, Jamie said. Not until you show me where you keep your pot of gold. Oh my. Because you know all leprechauns have gold. Let's see what happens next, because leprechauns are definitely tricky little creatures. There he is. He's looking a little worried right there. Now, everyone in Ireland knows that leprechauns make boots and dancing shoes for the fairies, who pay for them with gold. And everyone knows that if you catch a leprechaun, he'll pay for his freedom with his pot of gold. But this leprechaun was cleverer than most. Cleverer means pretty, smart, and tricky. That means he could outsmart you in a tricky way. He's very clever. Are you clever? Oh, please, mortal man, he pleaded. I'm just starting out making my fairy shoes, and I only have 1 or 2 pieces of gold in my pot. Won't you be taking a wish instead? That might be a good trade-off. Would you pick the wish or the gold? Let's find out what Jamie picks. Why, what would I want a wish for? Jamie asked. Me, who's about to die of starvation because my wife is sick and bad and can't dig the praties for the winter. And there's such puny praties anyhow. Puny means very tiny. Well, said the leprechaun, reaching into his pocket, you could wish for the biggest pratie in the world. It would last all winter, and you wouldn't have to do anything more than plant the seed, water it, and wait. Do you think Jamie's going to take the seed? Do you think he's going to take a wish, or will he want the gold? I think I might want the gold. Let's see what Jamie does. Well, that sounded good and wonderful to Jamie. Done, he shouted. And as the leprechaun dropped the seed into Jamie's hands, there he goes. Jamie let go of his coattails and off the leprechaun scampered. He went really fast too, didn't he? He had to get away. And then Jamie went back home. Let's see what Eileen thinks about this situation. When Eileen heard what he had done, she was furious. That means very angry. Jamie O'Rourke, you're not only the laziest man in all Ireland, but you're a fool as well. Giving up a pot of gold for a pretty seed. Well, I'm going to plant the seed and water it, and you'll see, Jamie said. And out he went. And that's kind of funny because he doesn't ever even like to plant and water and garden, but he's going to anyway. Oh my, what? A big surprise. That's what the leprechaun said would happen. Biggest potato. And Faith, Eileen did see in no time at all the biggest, finest potato plant had sprouted out of the ground, followed by the potato itself. Wow, that is a big one. It was so big, it pushed up not only the dirt in the garden, but the garden shed in the corner of the cottage too. Well, surely now it's ready to dig, Jamie said proudly. You think Jamie's going to dig that big, pretty? He did. He hoed all around it, but he couldn't dig the pretty out of the ground. He got a beam and a big rock and tried to pry it out. He pushed and he pushed, but it wouldn't budge. It wouldn't move at all. He was pondering what to do. His neighbor passed by on his way to the village. He couldn't believe his eyes. He couldn't wait to tell everyone in the village what he had seen. There's the village folk. And before you knew it, the hill up to Jamie's was filled with villagers coming to see the big potato. Wow, that would be a sight to see. Would you go see it? I definitely would. Where did you get it from? They asked. They had lots of questions for Jamie, and he was so proud to tell them. Jamie told them about the lucky night he caught the leprechaun and how smart he had been. Why, anyone could have gotten a pot of gold, he bragged, but the biggest pretty in the world, well, that took some doing now. However did you smart a leprechaun? They all asked at once. Jamie hesitated. He scratched his head. If I tell you how I did it, will you help dig up? If you tell us how you did it, we'll help you dig your pratty, Jamie. And he did. They grabbed shovels and hoes and started to dig. Well, that was smart. Jamie tells them the story, and they give him a hand digging and hoeing. They dug and they dug and they pushed and they shoved until the potato flew up out of its hole. Whoa! That was a ride for a potato. It rolled down the hill faster and faster until it reached the bottom, where it bounced up high and came to a stop, wedged between the stone walls on either side of the road. Uh-oh, that is a big problem. What to do now? They're stuck on one side. Jamie and Eileen are stuck on the other side. Nobody can pass down the road. Uh-oh. I think the townsfolk, they're going to get a little upset. That pratty is so big that no one, no cart, nothing can get by it. The constable complained to Father O'Malley. The constable is the policeman of the town. How's a body to get in and out of the village? What shall we do? The villagers wailed. This is a big problem for Jamie. Then they all looked at Jamie and said, "It's sure pretty. You'll have to move it out of the way." Uh-oh. More work for Jamie. Well, Eileen spoke up, there's more than enough pretty for everyone. Why don't you take some? Sharing is a good idea, especially with a potato so big. Let's see what happens next. Oh boy, teamwork. Wow, look at the things they're using to cut the potato. Not a normal thing that we would cut our potatoes with because it's so huge and tough. They're using saws and axes. So the villagers sawed and chopped and carted off huge pieces of potato while Jamie, his lazy self, sat on the stone wall and watched. Now that's a good life for a lazy man, for sure. All winter long, everyone had potato to eat and eat and eat until no one wanted to see or hear of potato again. They had boiled potatoes and mashed potatoes and smashed potatoes, fried potatoes, all kinds of potatoes. Wow, if I had to eat potatoes all winter, I might get sick of them too. Let's find out what happens next. It's springtime. In the spring, Jamie said, I saved a potato eye for a seed, and it's just about time to plant. But the villagers were not having any of it. Oh no, cried the villagers. If you promise not to plant it, Jamie, we'll promise before St. Patrick and all the saints to see that you and Eileen always have plenty to cook and eat. We don't want another giant pretty around here. Jamie smiled and agreed. What a perfect life for a lazy man. It all worked out in the end, didn't it? And so you see, darling Eileen, Jamie told her, I wasn't such a fool with that leprechaun after all. She's smiling. He's smiling. I think the dog's even happy. And look at all that food they promised that they would provide for Eileen and Jamie. And Eileen had to admit that Jamie O'Rourke was right. And look at the ending here for the leprechaun. He saved his gold. He kept his gold. He's very happy. And he's still at work in the moonlight making those fairy shoes. Oh, that was a great story. Remember, it's an Irish folk tale. So it's a story that was handed down from generation to generation. Well, it turned out really well for Jamie and Eileen and even the leprechaun. Well, I hope that you have a really happy St. Patrick's Day and that you enjoy lots of good Irish tales and stories about St. Patrick's Day, Ireland, and even leprechauns. Okay, until our next time together, keep reading and maybe you might even want to spy out for those little magical men, those leprechauns. All right, have a good one. Don't forget to wear green today.